Let me welcome everyone who's here to the author chat with Kat Martin, whose newest book is coming out in hardcover with Kensington in, I believe it's November or the end of October.
October 26th.
October 26th. And, you know, right before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that you can sign up for a signed ARC giveaway at the Kensington booth. There's a button like on the top monitor of our booth that'll bring you to a link to the form. And so I encourage everyone to check that out. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleague at Kensington, Jane Nutter. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Nutter. I work in the publicity and marketing department at Kensington Books. And I'm so thrilled to be here today to talk with Kat Martin about her new book, The Last Good Night, which is coming out on October 26th. And we're also joined by her editor, Alicia Condon, as well today. So just a brief intro on the book. It's the first in a brand new high-octane romantic thriller series where two characters stir up a hornet's nest of lies, adultery, and murder as a betrayed husband and a private detective investigate his estranged wife's disappearance. Kat Martin is the New York Times bestselling author of more than 60 books across multiple genres with 16 million copies in print. She's been published in 21 foreign countries and has been nominated for the prestigious Reader Award and won the Lifetime Achievement Award and Reviewer's Choice Awards from RT Book Reviews as well. And Alicia Condon has been acquiring commercial fiction for 30 years and is an editorial director at Kensington Books. She's had the privilege of working with a lot of bestselling authors like Kat Martin, Sylvia Day, Jane Ann Crane, Sandra Brown, and Christine Feehan, to just name a few. So to get into our chat today, first things first, Kat, do you want to give us the setup for The Last Good Night?
Well, the book is set on a ranch in a very extensive ranch. It's a 19,000 acre ranch. So it's a huge ranch. It's sort of the north and northeast, I guess I'd say, of Denver, Colorado. So it's up in the mountains, but it's just a beautiful setting. I had a lot of fun with the setting. I've been to Colorado many times, and I really wanted to write it. In fact, that's how I started the book. I started with the setting instead of the plot. I usually am a plot-oriented writer, but I started with the setting because I wanted to write a series of books or books set in Denver. So I thought that would be as good a place as any to start. And the ranch, you know, I looked where would a good place for a ranch. I do a lot of work on Google Maps. You know, I get on, and then I go on Google Earth Pro, and I can actually look at the terrain. I go on Zillow, I look at properties for sale. I actually find places that are real that would work for a setting for the book. And then of course I change it a little bit, but I try to do that. So the setting was my main start for this book, and it's set on a big ranch. As I said, the hero is a guy named Cade Logan, and he's one of three brothers. He's the hero of this book, and then the two brothers each have their own stories, and maybe it'll go on from there. I hope it does. So that's where we are.
Kat, you live on a ranch yourself there in Montana. One of the things that I found really fun about this book, as you say, is the setting, the very real feeling of the West and the people who live there, and that kind of rugged, down to earth, very connected to, you know, what's going on in the land. Do you think that, you know, a lot of your own life is coming out in this story?
We say ranch here, we only have 25 acres, but we're surrounded by national forest. So it's like a 2 million acre backyard. So that's us, but it's pretty, and then there's just open property all around us. So it feels like a lot more land, but it's actually small. But of course, in this case, he was a huge ranch. And yes, my family they were Western people. I mean, I came from, if I could get that picture down, I'll show you a picture of me when I was a little kid on a horse. But I was just raised around it all my life. My uncle my grandmother was one of the first rodeo. You've probably seen books about the rodeo girls in the 1960s. She was in 1916. She was one of the original cowgirls. So that tradition has come down in my family. So I've been around it all my life. I'm really comfortable. I never was a good rider, sadly, but horseback rider, I never was a good rider. I did ride, but I never was, I don't know what it was about it. I never got good at it, but we did pack into the high country, and we always have them around. We have 3 out there in the pasture right now. Those are not ours, actually. They're using them to film some stuff they're working on outside today. But yeah, so I mean, it's comfortable to me because it's my history all the way back really to the, I mean, honestly, my family, my great-great-grandmothers, one of the greats came over in a covered wagon. You know, it's one of those kind of stories, but it always was there. I've been to a jillion rodeos. My dad was a team roper. So, you know, that stuff sticks in your head pretty well. In fact, I wrote a book for you guys called Desert Heat that was set around the rodeo many years ago.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Yeah, one of my favorites too. And I get letters on it still. People like that book. Douglas, it was in Dallas Kingman was the hero in that book. That was fun.
Aside from your own personal experience that informs a lot of this book, I know you always do very intense research for every book. What was some of the more interesting research for The Last Night that you got into?
Well, we were talking about setting. I always research the setting, but this book, because it kind of, well, it starts in like November, so the weather gets progressively worse and all of that and that kind of stuff. But what I had to really look at, of course, I go back through and I look at the cattle industry because they're raising cows, and I never really was involved in that part of the West. I mean, I was more involved with horses and things, but you know, I wasn't ever at a cattle ranch, although I did go to a branding. Boy, that was a surprise. It was really exciting, but it was interesting anyway. But so I had to do a lot of, you know, I wanted to see what time of year do they round up and do all of that. You have to, but the plot twists around the mining industry in Colorado. So I really had to do a lot of research on, and it brought me back into the history of mining, the big silver rush they had there, and I guess the 60s through 90s or something. It was early on anyway. And then it came back a little bit, and they still mine there. So I did a lot of research on mining. That was one of the more interesting things I looked at. Each book seems like there's something that you really have to dig into in order to make it work. You can't guess it. You can't just fake it. At least I can't. Maybe
I think that is one of the things that I love the most about your books is how real they always feel. And when your suspense plot gets going in this particular book, in The Last Good Night, they're chasing down the killer of the hero's ex-wife, but there's a secondary plot involving an explosion at the mine that the hero owns the land on, and the two plots start to interweave as the story goes on. And I love that complexity, and I don't want to ruin this for anybody, so I won't go further, but one of the key turning points in the book has to do with the body of a man that they find, and it appears that he's committed suicide. And he turns out to be a key figure in their solve of who is behind some of these things. And what I loved was it appears that he's shot himself, but they figure out, because they see that he owns a rifle with a left-hand bolt, that he's a left-handed person and he never could have shot himself with this gun that they find in his right hand. And I never even knew that there was such a thing as a left-hand bolt. I mean, that's just the kind of detailed realism in your books that you take advantage of to, you know, make the plot really intriguing and believable.
I have to say my husband's a help in some of this, because we have, you know, this is Montana. People hunt here, so they have hunting rifles and things. And he, of course, he's a left-handed guy. So, you know, I knew that he had to get a special gun for that, because if you're going to shoot a hunting rifle with a bolt, you're going to have to you have to do it from the other side. So, you know, it's funny, that stuff, as the older you get, the more this trivia you have stuffed in your head, and it just sort of pops out a lot of times in the book. But I mean, I thought about it as I was going along, and I thought, you know, I thought that was kind of cool. But so, and I checked with him, I said, well, would this be right? Oh yeah, that's right. So he knows a lot about that, and fist fighting. I always have to go in and check with him on make sure I get the fist fighting right. You know, he's good on that's the only thing he really does anymore. Or I run the plot with him a little bit sometimes. If I get trapped in a corner and I can't figure out quite out how to, I think I know how to get out of it, but then I think, oh man, that's not going to work. Oh, what am I going to do? You know, I really used to do a distinctive outline, but I can't anymore because the plots are more complicated and it just doesn't, you have to take each clue, just like a police officer would. You have to figure the clues out as you're going along. And so I can't believe I have to do that. It seems like you could figure it out before, but I can't do it anymore. It's got out of hand for me. So now I have to work it just like a police detective or somebody would work. I mean, I know certain things, so I have to make them hook up. I mean, so I don't just go randomly across, but I have to get things happen. And then, oh, wow, that wouldn't happen like that. I have to go back and, yeah, that makes more sense. If now I see how they're going to catch this guy, you know, but it doesn't just happen. I can't do it in an outline anymore. I can't do it even a long outline. I couldn't figure it out.
You know, Kat, it's really interesting because I find that all the most exciting books are written that way. They're not all plotted out in advance the way you might think, because what happens up in your head that's perfectly rational doesn't wind up being that interesting. So the fact that you work your way into it like that actually makes it more exciting for the reader too.
Sleepless nights though, because it is, because you write something, boy, that's a great idea, and then you think that's a great idea, but how do I catch him? Actually, I spend more time trying to figure out how not to catch him than how to catch them, because today they have DNA, fingerprints. I mean, the massive ways to catch criminals. I'm surprised that anybody gets away with anything, really. It's just more, I think, more of a time element. The officers don't have enough time. The police don't have enough time to go through all this with every single case. There's too many cases. That's more the problem. But once you get, so you have to think of how he doesn't leave DNA, how he doesn't leave fingerprints. You're usually thinking of ways to outfox the cops. You know, that's what your job is, figured out when you're in the bad guy's head. You know, you have to figure out, and you always have to be thinking what they're thinking. How are they? They're not stupid, because if they were stupid, you'd catch them right away. Right? They have to be halfway intelligent. So if they're intelligent, how are they figuring out this whole thing? What are they doing? So you're always in figuring out the bad guys, trying to stay ahead of the good guys, and what's he thinking in order to do that? And he can't be a dummy. Like I said, he's got to be smart enough to at least think he's going to get away with it. Yeah. And maybe get close to getting away with it, right?
Well, you mentioned the cops not having time and, you know, to be able to solve in real life a murder situation. In this book, your heroine is actually a private detective. How did you decide how did you come to that?
You know, I sometimes if I have a hero, I didn't think I knew the problem, because I started with the dead wife. Things happen, new things. It was an old case, cold case, they call, you know, it was a cold case because she had died 8 years ago. And then, but things kept happening over these 8 years. And then finally it breaks loose again. And it stirred all the old feelings up that he had about this. He kind of felt like he had failed. They were divorcing anyway. So it wasn't so much of a romantic thing that he felt guilty about it, although he had a lot of guilt about that too, of the failed marriage situation. But he was just, the new stuff turned up. He thought, he felt guilty because he didn't solve the murder. He felt he owed her that. He knew she was murdered. He owed her that. Well, then he goes to it for a man detective, actually. He goes to the office of the man detective, the detective agency, and they recommend the woman because she had the ranching background. She could fit in an undercover situation, and how many people really could, you know, not that many. So it was a perfect combo. But as far as I'm trying to think back, did I think that I was going to use a lady detective? I think I probably did, because I knew the setup. I would need a detective. You have to go back, and you're so far. When you get to the end, it's all sort of together. You have to go back and think about, you know, the early stages. That was a year ago or so, you know, before just takes a year to write it nearly. So you're thinking back a year, how did I remember, you know, it just sort of goes along, you know. But yeah, right. I probably did think, gee, I want a lady detective. So I have to have a hero and heroine. I knew he was going to be the hero. And,
Right.
it's who you need to make the story work, you know?
This book opens up with that a really dramatic scene where they've discovered the car that the ex-wife was driving when she disappeared 8 years ago. And it's at the bottom of a nearby lake, and they're hauling it up out of the water, and the water's pouring out of the windows, and he's just standing there and kind of making this vow, I'm going to bring her killer to justice. That's such a powerful opening to that book. I absolutely love that.
I did too. I thought that really worked out. I like to start with something. I could see, sometimes I go back, I have to go back. I'll be into it 30 or 40 pages, and I think, because there's so much stuff you really need to know to make it work. There's nothing exciting. So sometimes I have to stop about there and think, what could I put, how can I start this that will get people's attention? In this case, I think I started with that. I think I already knew that. I can't remember again. I think I knew that I wanted to do that in the beginning, but I loved, and you know, it was almost like a metaphor in there, because it brought up so much of his emotions from what he had never really dealt with. You know, there's so much guilt and stuff for him in that whole thing, that the bad marriage, and she had cheated on him. He didn't know it. And then he finds out, it causes all these problems. I mean, the guy really had some baggage, you know what I mean? But he hadn't dealt with it. He got on with his life pretty well, but he really had that in there, and all this just dredged it up, and it really forced him to deal with it, I think.
Yeah,
she came in at the right time to kind of, he was over it, but he was over it enough to be involved with another woman. He wasn't that, you know what I'm saying? It was very far back there, but it was still this stuff that kept him from really having a complete life, I think, you know?
Yeah. And then when the private detective, Ellie, gets there to the ranch and starts investigating and going and asking questions, I love that part, because she just keeps turning up more and more secrets and scandals and things that people didn't know about, and things that people are trying to hush up, having to do with the wife, because she was no angel. And he sensed it, but I don't think he ever wanted to really admit to himself how far, you know, she had gone. She had a lot of secrets going on. So that also brings up so many great suspects as to, you know, who was it that killed her.
There's a song I just heard the other day, Toby Keith. I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then, and that was how he was. He didn't want to know, and then once he really knew, kind of, you know, you might, and in the song he lets it go for a while. The guy does. He doesn't want to know, and then finally, when he knows so much, he can't. You know, he has to deal with it. So they split up. But you know, he didn't want to. He didn't want. He wished he didn't know now what he didn't know then. You know, he was happier as a man who was ill-informed, put it that way. So it's an interesting plot. It turned out, I was happy with it by the time I got to the end. And I thought it was plenty exciting. I had plenty of excitement. Sometimes that's one thing I really like to do. I really like to keep the excitement level up as much as I can, you know.
Yeah, you do that. That's the hallmark of your books. I always say that they're a little bit like eating a box of popcorn. You kind of turn one page, then you can't stop. You can't keep yourself turning the next page, and before you know it, you finish the whole thing, because your writing style is there's not an extra word. You just, it's all action or emotion, or sexual tension, you know, all of which are equally exciting.
Thank you.
Did you start out writing that way, or was that something that you developed?
I recently, believe it or not, after all these books, about, I don't know, 5 books ago, we were not together at that particular book, but I saw this person taught, they said, look here. I saw it was a copy editor, and they took out these words, and I realized, because I write so lean anyway, I thought, I was kind of like, why in the world would they take any words? I write, so I add, I don't write and then take it away. I didn't, I mean, in other words, I do now, I do, but I'm not, a lot of writers write, they'll write a big thick thing and then they pare it down, and I don't do that. I just go thin, then I add. I'm an adder. But she went in there and she took, and when I saw what she did, I thought, oh man, I can make mine even tighter by doing this little trick that she showed me, you know. And it was so yeah, and I thought it made my books better, and I was like, wow, I'm glad I learned that. So you're never too old to learn anything, right? I mean, I'd already written at least 60 books by then, you know, so it was kind of like, wow, there's a cool little thing I can do. And I think it really even made it tighter, but I tend to write really lean. I'm a lean writer. You know, I can always pare something.
You are,
almost always.
and people love that because the books are so fast paced. It's like watching a movie. There's nothing extra in there. Everything is important.
I like movies, and movies have a thing that I do. I started doing it unconsciously. Now I kind of notice it that I do it. But there's a thing called, I wish I could remember the guy who, there's actually a technical term for it in the movies, but they have plot point shifts, paradigm, I think they say shifts. And they go, in a movie, they go 30 minutes and 30 minutes, that's an hour and a half film, so roughly. In a book, and I saw a guy talk about it at a conference, and he said, it's writers, really good writers, write to about a third of the book, something drastic happens, they write another third, and then something happens. So they follow it, but they just do it naturally. You know, you're just in your mind, you're thinking, I'm getting bored, something needs to happen here, you know, because you're doing it but the movies actually study it and everything. But writers don't. And like I realized when I was reading like Sidney Sheldon and some of these people, they do it. And I don't think they thought, gee, I need to do something here. I mean, I don't really think I need to do something. But if I look back now, I can see about a third of the way in, something will happen, or you know, certain things, because I'm starting to get bored. I'm thinking, well, heck, if I'm getting bored, they're going to get bored. So I really need to think about what to do here. So that's what I do. I really follow an interesting thing, you know, but I don't go, gee, I went, you know, 100 pages. But it just sort of comes that way, you know.
So the next book is going to be a very different kind of a story, and also starts out with an amazing opening scene where the heroine is sound asleep in her bed and wakes up, realizes there's an intruder in the house. And I mean, if that were me, I would hide under the covers, but she jumps up, she goes and confronts him.
Well, she doesn't think I think what happens in my head, and you might remember, she doesn't really, first of all, she doesn't know what it is. So she's going down to kind of looking through the house. Then she sees it, and it kind of makes her mad because she thinks it's her cousin, and she thinks he's stealing something that she knew he wanted, this map and so that's how she got into it. She wasn't that stupid as she's going to go confront some guy. But then all of a sudden, you know, it's just sort of like on you. You think, well, that, you know, the guy's actually in the book, he's kind of a pudgy. And then she realized, well, that can't be him. This guy's a big, taller guy, you know, and that's about the point where you're thinking, uh-oh, what have I done? And then it goes on from there. So yeah, but you know, I don't do, and they're pretty, I guess you could say kick-ass, but I really don't do kick-ass heroines. I mean, they're strong and they're tough, but even the detective, she really goes undercover's her deal. She's not really out there, you know, trying to shoot things up and do that. She's going undercover to find out who did it. But if she has to be tough, she is tough. And she has to be in this book, several times. She has to be a tough person, but they're not really in the forefront of the tough. You know what I mean? It's not how I am. So it would be hard for me to do that.
They're completely relatable characters always. They always have this kind of down to earth, and there's always a core of sweetness there.
Yeah, I think they're nicer. They're pretty nice people generally.
So the reader really relates to them. Yeah,
nice. That's good to hear. Always good to hear. Believe me. In fact, we got this little novella coming out, and actually, it's before the book, right before Last Good Night. We wanted a little shorter story for it, and to kind of introduce some of the characters. In fact, he's in the opening scene, Sam Bridger, the guy that's in the little novella, and I meant that to be more of a higher, I meant it to be a little more edgy, you know, but what happened with it was the character who was in it, the woman was so nice that she ended up to softened up the story a little bit. I thought it had a little more emotion maybe than some of, you know, because it was a little more of a softer story than I normally write, but it still has plenty of, it has high action, but it was a little more of an emotional, a little more of a softer story, because the woman, I couldn't make her that tough. She just wasn't that tough. So she just, and I thought, well, they're either gonna like it or not, but I think she was so likable. The end, what was her name? I can't hardly remember now.
She is such a likable character. She's a model, and she's incredibly beautiful. And so everybody who meets her kind of thinks that she's just this blonde, bitchy, gorgeous woman. And she surprises everybody, including the reader, because she is so sweet. And she really makes that novella sing. The title of it is One Last Kiss, which I love too.
And very, by the way, Alicia's really good with titles, and I'm really bad with titles, so I appreciate, I am so bad at titles. And so I appreciate any help like that, especially if you can read it and think, well, how about this? Oh yeah, that's great. So I thought that was both of those titles are good.
That was
Last
yours?
Night actually was that was kind of mine. I actually originally thought of The Last Goodbye, but then so much was happening at, with the night hits last night with her, and that's what set off the whole thing. So anyway, we jointly came up with some decent titles, and I think those two are good. So I wish we had help from, we need to do an audience thing where they give us some titles. It's hard if you haven't read the book, or know the concepts and stuff. Sometime we'll have to try that, see if anybody comes up with something.
Matt, do we have questions that people would like to ask Kat?
Let me see. I've put the APB out. Jane, do you see anything?
Yeah, I mean, I had Alicia's done such a wonderful job asking a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
But I actually had a question for Kat. You're so, as Alicia has been saying, you have such an amazing ability to write these like really intensely emotionally involving action scenes. And like, I was just wondering, how do you go about crafting scenes like that? Because as Alicia said, it does really honestly read like a movie. And so like, do you visualize, or how do you go about that process?
I do. I do visual. I like movies. I watch a lot of movies. So maybe subconsciously, that helps. And I like high action adventure, but I like Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and, stuff like that. The what's the one, Live or Die with Bruce Willis, Die something, it's one of his famous movies. But
Die Hard.
Die Hard, yeah. All those movies like that, I've watched them all my life, and I like that whole where a movie like even Die Hard's a perfect example. That movie has a lot of emotion. If you remember his wife, he's in the tower, it's Christmas Eve, his wife is involved in it, and he's trying to save his family. I mean, it's not just action, it has a lot of emotion. And I think the combination of those two things is just irresistible, and if you can do it, which is not that easy to do, it makes a good story.
And I always like to ask this question too, because I know that people really like it. If you could cast like Cade and Ellie, like from like the pool of Hollywood actors, like who do you like envision in your head as could be?
I actually, for one time in my life, I did. Well, actually, who might be good in that. In fact, it'd probably be great in that. You think about is let's think about let's make my eyes water. Think about Thor. Who's the guy that plays Thor?
Oh, Chris Hemsworth.
Chris
Australia.
Hemsworth.
Huh?
Chris Hemsworth.
That's him. There you go. He wouldn't be bad. Would he? Let's put him in the movie. Oh, the girls are harder for me. Okay, I'll take some input. Who do you guys think? Alicia, who do you think could be good in that?
I'm terrible with actresses myself.
She's built sweet, but very well. I don't know. That'd be a tough one. I'd have to put some real thought into that. I haven't been. I mean, it's funny how you always remember the men actors, but the women. I think women. Well, the movies. They're not too many. The women. They're more interchangeable. I hate to say that, but it's kind of the truth if you think about it. A lot of different women can play a role against the guy. The man tends to stand out. you know, like Bruce Willis. I can't remember who the wife was in that. She was a good actress though. They're good actresses. A lot of them are wonderful actresses, but they just, I don't know, maybe it's their job to blend. Maybe that's part of the acting process, is to compliment the man, especially with some guy like Thor. I mean, you know, you're not going to have to be a Catwoman or something. What's her name? It's Scarlett Johansson or somebody's pretty exciting. Those guys. You know.
So someone actually messaged me a question for you. It says, I love getting movie recommendations from authors, but in the meantime, while I'm waiting for The Last Good Night to come out, do you have any books that you can share that I can read in the meantime?
Well, I like my, if you haven't read, Beyond Control is one of my favorites, which Alicia and I worked on, and Beyond Reason's the first book in the series. That's my favorite. It's Lincoln Kane's the hero, and he's a multi-millionaire that's got tattoos and rides a Harley. I mean, you can't hardly get any more, and plenty of, that book's high action. It's really hot, fast paced. And I actually had an option for a movie, but then the pandemic hit, and it's just, all that stuff's kind of gone away. So, you know, nobody's even making movies to speak of. So I like to recommend that because it's the first of a new series that it's called my Texas Trilogy. And that's a fun one if you haven't read it. Lincoln Kane, I mean, God, 6'5", you know, he was such a great hero. And he had a girl that was an interesting match to him. Her grandfather owned a trucking company, so she inherits a trucking company. And so he was in the transportation business, a billionaire, basically, not a multi-millionaire anyway. And so that book, it was an interesting combination of the two people. I thought that they really stood up to each other well, because he was so powerful and had all the money and the looks, everything. And she, you know, here she's a truck driver's kid, basically. So there was an interesting, but he came from that background and built himself up. So really, ultimately, at the bottom line, they worked, and it was really I think one of my best books. So there's my recommendation, Beyond Reason. And it goes Beyond Reason. What's the second one? Alicia, what's the second one? Beyond Reason, Beyond Danger, Beyond Control. The three brothers. I like to write brothers. Yeah, brothers do it for me. I like that. You know, I've done some sisters, but I don't know, brothers. There's something about them. They can come to each other's aid. You know, just it's my favorite thing to do. I like that series in general. I like writing.
And I think an awful lot of readers love that band of brothers feeling, the camaraderie, the loyalty, and the jokes, the whole atmosphere makes for a very engaging series.
Yeah, my husband has 3 sons, and they're you know, I see it with them, 3 boys, right? And they're really, they even if they live apart, there's always this thing between them. You know, they're close, they're within a few years of each other. They're good looking guys, tall, good looking guys, and they're real macho guys. So they're fun to kind of see, you know, you can kind of see as a model those kind of that kind of thing. I like that, I think. And I think it's important, you know, family life's important to me in my stories, you know. So a lot of times they don't have good family backgrounds, but they're craving it if they, you know, which everybody does probably.
And that's very much what you've set up in this series. You've got 3 brothers who are kind of estranged as The Last Good Night begins. Only the one is living on the family ranch. The other 2 have gone off. And at the end of the book, there's a reunion of the 3 brothers at the first one's wedding. And you're going to then go on and tell the stories of the other ones. But that's an interesting scenario. As the series develops, I think we're going to see, I'm guessing, more interaction among the brothers.
Yeah, I've never done that before. And I thought that was kind of cool. I was like, you know, why do they always have to get along perfectly? Maybe these guys don't get along. Maybe they do, but they did, or I mean, they did, but they want to, but they're, you know, things happen in life. And I see it with his, you know, they've gone off at different times, and it was like, you know, basically raised them. So they've gone off at different times in their lives, and then they come back because there's that cord, that family blood ties. That's the name of the series, and that's the truth. It's a blood ties, and it ties you. Blood's thicker than water. They always say that, and that's the truth. It's hard to get away from family, really, especially if underlying you have a real depth of feeling for that, for the people.
That's going to be an interesting, you know, kind of continuity to the series, an interesting
Yeah.
thing as you explore that
I have them
intensity of
already.
those family ties.
Yeah, I think it's so far so good. I've enjoyed because they're back friendlier in the second book. You know, they're in the second book. Both of them are in the second book, which I like. I mean, it really came up good. I don't like to overdo it because you're really focusing on one of the person's life. That's where you really are. But I like that they have a little bit. They're actually their personal life is developing a little bit if you think about it, because you now have somebody else back in your life that wasn't in your life before.
Yeah.
So.
It'd be interesting, Kat, to see them really in danger, maybe in the third book, where they've got to come to.
Well, they're going to be in
fight
danger in the second book. Actually, the second brother is going to be helping in this adventure because they're going to need he's a military guy, so they're going to need somebody who really knows what they're doing, and so they're going to call on him. So he's going to get in some action, believe me. And
okay,
yeah.
I need to interject here because I think we could carry this conversation on for another 45 minutes.
Yeah,
but I think we're at a good ending point. I want to thank everyone here for participating, Alicia and Kat and Jane. This was really wonderful. For everyone watching still, the book is The Last Good Night. You can sign up to receive a signed ARC at our Kensington booth at the US Book Show. And I just want to wish everyone a great rest of the day. And thank you very, very much, Kat. This was a really special little chat.
It was great. I mean, you guys made it easy. I'm very nervous about things like this, so this was good. I was really worried about it, so you guys did a great job. You put me at ease, and it was good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, farewell for now. Thank you.
Farewell for now.
Thank you, everyone.